So no, my problem. Locke says, well, we got a distinction in the mind and the body and so forth and so on. He says, oh, on the other hand, I'm not at all convinced on philosophical grounds that the brain doesn't do the thinking, which was, quite an extreme view for him to entertain. He doesn't advocate it, but he says, look, just as a philosopher, I can't see that. I mean, I got to accept it because I'm a Christian and all that shit, but then he goes on. But so his idea of personal identity is you should mainly think of personal identity as a relation between experiences, and the key is memory.
Right. Actually, I found the quote, and I think it's in your book, and what he said, his actual words are, as far as this consciousness can be extended backwards to any past action or thought, reaches the identity of that person.
Yeah, good memory. That's exactly right. Now, the important thing is this consciousness. And he doesn't use the word memory too much. So what is this consciousness? Well, people use the term memory because he's talking about past actions and thoughts. But you got to distinguish between at least three kinds of memory. There's memory that. I remember that Columbus discovered America, but that doesn't mean I discovered
like propositional.
America. Yeah. Or factual, yeah, or something. And then there's kind of event memory. I remember, oh Christ, who was it? Who's the guy that shot Oswald? Harvey Oswald.
You're not going to get any help from me.
But
we can get help from Google if you want
it. I'll pick a more important event. I remember Dwight Clark catching Joe Montana's pass in the first NFL title game that San Francisco ever won from Dallas. Everybody, you remember that.
No.
Surely your parents replayed it over and over, right?
They didn't. I don't remember this.
Where are you from originally?
Chicago.
Oh, yeah, nice place. Anyway, so that's event memory. Remember perceiving an event, but that doesn't mean the action you perceived was yours. So what he's talking about is what we call first-person memory. And the interesting thing about it is we seem to leave out part of it. So I don't say, I remember that I had breakfast. I don't say, I remember that John Perry ate breakfast, or I remember John Perry eating breakfast. I could say those are both true. But what I say is, I remember eating breakfast. Right? Seems to be a pronoun missing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the way we do it, which is very interesting. So Locke has the memory view, and if you're a naturalist and you think, well, persons are human beings, at least the ones we know about. Human beings are animals. The animals are part of the natural world. No particular reason to believe that there's anything very non-physical about them. At most, there's these non-physical properties of the brain, if you want to believe in those, qualia. But basically, we got all kinds of animals. Humans are a species of animals, and we use pretty much the same criteria that's tests for identity for all of them. The same body and so forth and so on. So if you're a naturalist, you don't want to get too far away from that. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem like it seems like you can accept Locke, and you can accept that, yes, and this kind of memory is the product of evolution. It's something that humans and probably other higher level mammals have, and some behavioral criteria for it, because so forth and so on. So it's not necessarily a non-naturalistic approach to personal identity. People say, well, look, if you got an animal and you got the same animal, you must have the same person. Well, that's not quite right. Let's go back to roads and highways, right? when you come down Highway 1 from Eureka and you come down Highway 101 from Sacramento or wherever the hell it is, they meet at the Golden Gate Bridge. And you go across the Golden Gate Bridge, and then they party again. So you got clearly two different highways. You got Highway 1 and you got Highway 101. The taxes from the state go for Highway 1. The taxes from the federal government go for Highway 101, because one's a federal highway, one's a state highway. On the other hand, they seem to share this part. So is the part that goes over the Golden Gate Bridge, is that two highways occupying the same space? Or is it something else? So the point is that even you say highways are physical, roads are physical, state highways are physical, national highways are physical, so that ought to solve all the problems, but it doesn't. Right? There's other things that are built in and so forth, and so I'm just gambling on it. Anyway. So Locke's theory, then some contemporary philosophers who've added to that, Sidney Shoemaker
and Grice. I know that you mentioned Grice.
Grice, yeah, Grice came up. So Grice was a student, I guess, at Oxford, yeah, and he published one article pretty early in life. So that was on personal identity, and then he got he got drafted into World War II.
Oh,
along.
I thought you were going to say he got drafted into the philosophy of language.
Well, kind of. That after he got back from World War II, he kind of got drafted into philosophy of language. And don't know. So it's pretty much the same with Austin and Urmson. Urmson was in a prisoner's camp for most of World War II. He was one of the ones at Dunkirk that didn't make it to the ships in time. Anyway, he's an old friend of mine. Oh, he's a dead friend of mine, actually. So what was my point? Yeah.
You've kind of got a gallows sense of humor sometimes. You kind of have a gallows sense of humor.
Yeah, I suppose. So Grice, Grice had this incredibly important paper, or series of papers, about the philosophy of language and pragmatics. But the first paper he published that most people didn't know about until I included in that anthology was this paper on personal identity that tries to take Locke's theory and sort of logically reconstruct it in terms of concepts from logic, like equivalence relation and so forth. I don't quite remember what Locke said and what I interpreted him as saying, but anyway, it was a very nice thing, and I got the idea that to get Locke right, you had to, to make Locke plausible, you had to put some conditions on this relation between extending of consciousness, as he puts it, or first person memory. It should be it should be it probably shouldn't be transitive, right? Somebody showed that, I don't know, Butler or one of those guys. So suppose we'll just take you're in Chicago, you go for a vacation to Minnesota, you and your brother go out and steal some raspberries, you get caught, right? Very traumatic event in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Then 15 years later, you're in some war or other. Hate to think, but you didn't serve in Afghanistan, did you?
No.
God, thank God. So let's suppose, though, you're in Afghanistan, you do something heroic. And as you're doing that heroic thing, you think, God, I've turned into a pretty good guy. I'm a hero. I'm saving all these people. I do remember stealing raspberries, which was a sin, but so the hero and the raspberry stealer, same person.
Mm-hmm.
Because first person memory. Then, 50 years later, or 60 years later, or 40 years later, you're a general getting senile. And you're sitting in your rocking chair, remembering your heroic deed. But by then, you can't remember stealing the raspberries.
Yeah.
So this relation isn't transitive.
Right.
But that doesn't mean personal identity isn't transitive. A is the same person as B if there is an event such that A did it and B remembers it, or if there is a sequence of events such that each member of the sequence remembers the previous one, but you don't require that the first one requires it.
Right. But they're both part of the sequence.
Yeah. But then, you can think of examples. Well, that's not going to quite work because, you have to allow that it's the same as if A has a first person memory of this earlier person stage's actions. And C, who's beyond A, also has a memory of this earlier person's actions. But A doesn't. You have to change the direction.
Yeah, this is where a chalkboard would be helpful.
Yeah, but Grice kind of figures that all out. That's a very big contribution. So it's an interesting subject, and I wrote an anthology that still brings in a couple $100 a year. So.